Bedros, welcome, man. Thanks for joining me.
Mike, thanks for coming out.
Absolutely. I'm excited. So for people that might not know you and your story, why don't you give them the spark notes? There's so much that I want to dive into for it, but let's give them some context before we dive into it.
Sure. The easiest way to kind of tell my story is I'm the immigrant edge and the American dream. I kind of look at myself like the Cinderella man. Immigrant edge because we escaped communism, Soviet Union in 1980. I was 6 years old when we came here to the United States. My dad was a member of the Communist Party. That was pretty cool, but he didn't want to be a member, so he's like, we're out of here. He risked his life to give us freedom and opportunity in the United States. But when we grew up here, we were poor, broke, didn't understand the language or the culture, and lived in Section 8 housing. Had it pretty hard. When I say pretty hard, like, I'll give you a couple examples. My dad discovered that grocery stores have dumpsters behind them, and so when the food expires, they throw it away. So he's like, hey son, you're gonna crawl in there, you're gonna pick out the bags of bread and milk and vegetables and anything that was edible, we're gonna eat it. My mom and dad and my older brother, older sister, all were working multiple jobs below minimum wage at the time. And the minimum wage wasn't like $15 or whatever it is now, $20. It was like $3-4, and they were making like $2.50 an hour. And so they had multiple jobs. So I was like, jokingly, I was the breadwinner. Like, yeah. Their money went towards paying for our half of the Section 8 housing that the government gave us, the apartments, and for the lights and electricity. And then my job was because I was the smallest and scrappiest, I would go into the dumpsters and fish out food. And then one time I got lice, dude. I got lice, and my hair was just like, my head was on fire. I was itching it. And my mom's like, what's the matter with you? I'm like, I don't know, my head's itching. And she's like, holy crap, you've got lice. And we couldn't afford lice treatment. So she had my dad siphon out gasoline from a parked car and just wash my hair with gasoline. Like, that's what a foreigner mom does. You get resourceful.
Yeah.
But then you kind of fast forward all that resourcefulness and all that adversity that I dealt with as a child, being bullied and picked on and beat up for being a foreigner, not speaking the language, going to multiple elementary schools and junior highs. Man, as I became an entrepreneur, I'm like, that was training grounds for being an entrepreneur, for being like a peak performer in life. Because if you're going to be a high-performing human, you need to know how to deal with adversity and setbacks and failures and self-doubt and other people's doubt and other people's messaging to you of their projection of how they see you, feel you, experience you. So I'm grateful I went through that hardship.
Yeah. Dude, there's so many cool pieces of your journey that I'm so excited to jump into, and you alluded to a bunch of them right there, but I'm curious, like, I love this positive connotation of the breadwinner that you've kind of attached to the story. What do you think that did to prepare you for this almost necessity to develop this resourcefulness?
Well, it taught me that you could either go to bed hungry, like truly, like go to bed hungry, or if you were scrappy and resourceful and willing to go through many different dumpsters, you will find food for the night. The same applies for business. So right now, our Fit Body Bootcamp franchise, we've got about 800 locations worldwide, mainly in US and Canada. We're expanding to Europe, UK. Now, trademark attorneys and trademarking laws are different there. Mm-hmm. And franchise attorneys, franchise laws are different there. Territories, all these things are different there. I don't know the answers, but we're going to get resourceful, and we're going to keep trying, and then we're going to have Fit Body Bootcamp locations there. And then when we do, then we're going to Australia and New Zealand.
Yep.
And we start all over again with resourcefulness, because the alternative is to go to bed hungry. And I've been taught that I ain't going to bed hungry. And it is the best lesson. And the other thing you just said, you said, hey, you kind of, twisted it up and said, you're the breadwinner. Well, I could either say, hey, poor me, we were the victims and kids laughed at us when I was dumpster diving and wearing hand-me-down clothes and clothes. Actually, do you remember the Munsters?
Yeah.
The TV show? My parents found a bag of clothes, and they were for a kid-size clothes. One of the sweaters that fit me was Herman Munster, and it said Herman across it. So in one of the 4 or 3 elementary schools that I went to, they called me Herman the entire time I was there, right? Yeah. Now, and then it got to the point, this is embarrassing, but it got to the point where I would respond to Herman instead of Bedros. So the point is, I could either say, like, man, I was a victim and I had such a bad and crappy childhood, etc., or I can reframe it. Mm-hmm. It is so important for someone who wants to be a peak performer, a high performer in life, to reframe the adversity into an advantage. So I called myself the breadwinner.
Yeah.
Man, I was a breadwinner at the age of 6.
Dude, I love it. Did you always know, like, Have you always done that throughout your life, or is that something that you learned to kind of reframe? Because I love this advantage versus adversity. Was that something that, like, what was your journey learning that?
Well, the journey was, I realized probably when I was a one-on-one personal trainer, when I started off as a one-on-one personal trainer, one of my personal training clients, his name is Jim Franco. I talk about him in my book, Man Up. Like, he was my first mentor, but I didn't realize he was a mentor until years after. When I was personal training him at the gym, I would say, hey, Jim, I want to one day own my own fitness studio, like personal training studio. He's like, well, what's stopping you, kid? And I was like, well, you know, I've got these 2 side jobs. I'm a fry cook at Disneyland. I'm a bouncer at a gay bar. The gay bar paid more than the straight bar, that's why. Having said that, I do know what women go through. Like, guys can be pretty hands-on and grabby, even gay men. Man, I worked at Oz off the 5 freeway out here in Anaheim. But anyways, all that said, but my job as a bouncer was to make sure that skinheads didn't come into gay bash. And so that's why they paid more. So I'm like, crap, I don't even like to fight, right? So I'm like venting to Jim Franco, like, dude, I work at a nightclub that I don't want to be in because I don't want to fight skinheads, and I'm a fry cook at Disneyland and all this stuff. He's like, you know what your problem is? You don't know how to close. You're an order taker. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you're an order taker. The moment you learn how to close the deal. And so, like, having a mentor built in, so 3 times a week he would work out with me, and afterwards I would just bend his ear about, well, what do I do about this? How do I make money? I used to use the old, well, it takes money to make money, Jim. He's like, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You can put sweat equity in. My first experience with adversity, right? Like, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, we didn't have money to buy food, but I was able to dumpster dive. I used my time and sweat, energy, to find food. He's like, I can loan you the money. You would have to put sweat equity in and do the work and then pay me back with 8% interest. I'm like, deal. That's how I opened up my first gym. So he taught me that really I can put myself through adversity more. If I don't have the money, I can just put in my time, my energy, my effort, and it's as good as money. And as I thought about it, I'm like, wait a minute, I did that as a kid when I was the breadwinner. So I just need to do that more. He'll put in the money, therefore no effort on his part. I'll put in the effort, energy, and work on my part since I'm not putting in money. And it's an equal trade. And that's how adversity becomes an advantage. Like, people think you need money to make money. No, you don't. You need a good contact, because Mike might have the money and I've got the time and effort. Let's go, we're in business.
Yeah, I love that. What did the journey look like before meeting Jim? Because I think a lot of people, I want to give context to this, because a lot of people look into it and they'll be like, oh, well, you know, Bedros got so lucky because he met Jim and Jim helped fund the first product or whatever, without looking at the countless years of growing yourself. Like, what did that first piece of that journey look like?
So the first 2 businesses before that, I failed. So at 18, I decided I'm going to be a DJ. And I love music. I play the drums, all types of percussions. I am pretty good with rhythm. And so I'm going to be a DJ. But again, I didn't know how to sell and market myself. Like, that inevitably becomes a bottleneck no matter what you want to do.
Yeah.
You have to promote yourself. These days, the kids call it, you have to get a following, a social media following. But even that, the following's not enough. You got the following, how to turn the followers into the dollars.
Yeah.
And that's where someone like me comes in and goes, here's how I can help you do that. But when I didn't have that skill set, I failed at DJing. I bought all the equipment and then failed at it. Then, in 1997, I saw the internet was popping off with AOL and dial-up and all that stuff. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to sell supplements online. This is pre-Google, pre-Yahoo, pre-Facebook. So you can't run ads. No one was selling traffic or anything. So I would literally get on AOL and email guys. I would look at their AOL profile. If they had bodybuilding, powerlifting, fitness, I would send them an email, 200 a night. Hey, my name is Bedros Keuilian. I own this thing called TotalMuscle.com, and we sell supplements at a discount because we don't have a brick and mortar to pay rent in, blah, blah, blah. Here's the link if you want to go buy it. It was like this, half the time it was like bunk orders, like with stolen credit cards. There was no address verification with credit cards and all that stuff like we have now. That went out of business. That made me homeless. And I was homeless for 3 months, living out of a 79 Toyota pickup because I used my rent money as my last ditch effort to get that TotalMuscle.com working.
Yeah.
And it failed. But in hindsight, I learned something else. I was too far ahead of market. There's always a seed, and this is not a Bedros line, this is a Napoleon Hill line. There's always a seed of advantage buried in the shitstorm of adversity. You just have to dig and find that seed. So I was like, oh, wait a minute. There's no Google. Like, there's no search engine. There's no social media platform to get the customers. You can't send out 200 emails a night. There's no email marketing at that time. So I was too far ahead. So being too far ahead of the market doesn't work either, right? So it was another lesson I learned. And sometimes the best, my Navy SEAL friends, they say the best lessons they've learned have been written in blood. The best lessons we've learned as entrepreneurs have been written in lost money. Like we've bled money.
Yep.
And it's the same concept. You remember that. When you lose blood or you lose money, you're like, I'm never making that mistake again.
Yep.
So adversity has been a massive teacher for me. And it is for most people if they just reframe it and go, where's the seed of advantage that I can pluck out of this? Mm-hmm. But far too often we just see a shitstorm, not realizing if we dig deep into that shitstorm, there is a seed of advantage or learning or experience or a pivot you can make.
Have you always been so capable of doing that reframe, or because I think society almost conditions the victim, the negativity. You look in the news right now, the big thing is coronavirus and everything going on. We're very conditioned to almost fear.
Yeah.
So were you always able to reframe that so powerfully, or did you fall into that victim mindset at all growing up?
Of course I did, man. I would hear my dad walk around our house, or our apartments, I should say, especially at the end of the month, he would say, we ran out of money before we ran out of month. He hated long months. If every month was February for him, 12 months of February would be great because then he would, barely run out of money. But we would always run out of money before we run out of month. The last 7, 8, 9, 10 days of the month, he'd have to figure out, am I paying the gas bill, the electric bill, the water bill? And so I definitely grew up with a victim mindset. I definitely grew up that money is for the white collar people, for people who live and were born and live in America, not people who immigrated here like I did. I definitely had a very negative, even toxic association with money. It's just not for me. It's money's trouble. It seems like we're always having money trouble. So money trouble. However, as I became a personal trainer, I think this is the only stroke of luck I've had, was when you become a personal trainer, especially when you're doing one-on-one personal training, you're working with affluent people.
For sure.
Right? I mean, these are people that, listen, if they're affording $800 to $1,000 a month, and by the way, they weren't paying me that. They were paying that to LA Fitness. LA Fitness paid me $15 an hour, right? But I'm like, in what other world would a 22-year-old personal trainer with a broke mindset be able to interact with multimillionaires other than a gym, like a big gym, box gym that sells high-end personal training? So all of a sudden I'm like, holy crap, my clients speak differently. They look at money as a tool. Jim Franco was like, yeah, every dollar is accountable to bring me back another dollar. I'm like, it is? It's like, yeah, man, through rental properties, through software I own, through whoa, tell me more, right? He's like, I'm gonna loan you 50 grand, you're gonna pay me back with 8% interest. I loan you 50, I get more back. Like, holy crap. And by the way, he still stayed a 50% business partner. He gave me the screws, but that's okay. That was a great lesson too. Learn to negotiate. I can reframe the hell out of everything. And so at some point, I don't know, it wasn't factory installed for me to reframe things. I just realized that I could either take the victim route, which is what society wants you to do, because it's easy to get attention. Woe was me, I was molested. By the way, I was molested as a kid in Armenia by 2 older boys. Woe was me about that. I'm a victim about that. I'm a victim when I came to this country and I got bullied and didn't speak English and Section 8 housing and hair washed with gasoline and traumatized in multiple different ways. Okay, now what? How many people said, woe was you, patted me on the shoulder and then sent me on my way? Now what? I'm still some blue-collared, broke-minded Armenian. Or I go, fuck that, I'm now an American. I got clients around me who are talking investments and generational wealth. I'd never even heard those 2 words put together. I've heard wealth, I've heard generation. Generational wealth, I was like, tell me more. They're like, that's when your kids, grandkids have money because of you. I was like, whoa, explain that mindset to me, right? And Jim Franco explained to me, he had a business that he bought that he thought the business was going to do X. It ended up going through 2 pivots and it did not Y, but Z. That's it. Pivot 3 is when it started to make money. I got a company that I own right now called Fit Pro Newsletter. Thousands of gym owners use it, automated email marketing. I started that as one thing. The industry said, if you pivot this way and this way, we'll buy it and use more of it. Okay. And so I did. So sometimes you just got to make the pivots instead of going, well, what I made is going to work and make me money. No, it's not. The market will tell you. I can So I could either chalk it up as failure, or I could say that didn't work. What next?
Yeah. What do you think what part of your journey prepared you to be receptive to that new mindset? Because you've put yourself in this situation where you're surrounded by people that are talking differently, thinking differently. Finally, you're at this point where you're like, generational wealth, to use that term. Like, what is it? I want to learn about it. What do you think prepared you to be open to that?
I'm going to go back to Jim Franco, like my first mentor, right? So when he told me like, hey, you don't know how to close, you don't know how to sell, you're an order, he called me an order taker. I was offended by that too. I was like, order taker? He's like, yeah, you're like a waiter or waitress at a restaurant. People come in hungry, they're gonna order food. A smart waiter or waitress can upsell, therefore get bigger tips, right? I was like, ooh, okay, got it. So he started bringing me Brian Tracy, Tom Hopkins, Zig Ziglar cassette tapes, and that led to like Tony Robbins and Dan Kennedy and Jay Abraham and Jim Rohn, and before you know it, I'm listening to all this like self-help, right? Again, from Jim Franco. They talk about two types of mindsets: fixed mindset, open mindset. Fixed mindset is also a closed mindset, meaning I am the way I am and I'm always going to be this way. Open mindset is I could be anything I want. I'm going to be an American, I'm going to create generational wealth, and I'm going to create an empire, and I'm going to create an empire on top of that. And I'm going to lose my accent. There's no reason I should need to have an accent. I see kids that are born here that have an accent. Like, why do you have an accent? Well, my parents talk with a Hispanic accent or an Armenian accent. Get rid of your accent. You're American. Assimilate, right? Like, I made it a choice to get rid of my accent. My brother didn't. He sounds like freaking Borat. I don't. There's a big difference. You might be suspect when you talk to him. That doesn't make you racist. You just go, hey, you don't sound like me. That's it. You know, your subconscious mind, you don't even process it. Your subconscious mind goes, something about him's not right. But Bedros talks to me and I kind of like him. We're brothers. The only difference is he's got an accent, I don't. So I was like, what am I going to do that's different? Like, I chose to be open-minded. Open-mindedness came to me through Jim Franco via all the self-help books. And then once I caught on to that, it was fire. Now, like, I was buying everything on eBay. I do feel bad. I owe Tony Robbins a lot of money because I was buying all of his, like, best DVDs and stuff and CDs. Like, they were like, people would dub it. And,
oh, really?
Yeah, I feel bad. But I've donated a lot of money to his causes, so we're good.
There you go. So you've shared a bunch of cool stories from your childhood, like obviously escaping the communist Soviet Union, eating out of dumpsters. The gasoline story with the lice is super vivid. What do you think are some of the most powerful lessons that you learned from that upbringing that have served you the most into building like this epic empire that you've built?
Good question. 3 specific lessons, and ironically, it's one of my 4 key keynote speeches that I give. It's actually one of the more popular ones, and it's the 3 R's. The first one we talked about, being resourceful. Like, when you're all out of resources in life, be resourceful, right? The second one is you must be resilient, and a great example of that is my dear friend Jason Redman. He's a retired Navy SEAL now. In 2007, he was on a mission. And he was the ground force commander, so he's up there on, with like 7 other SEALs, and they're walking, and they've got the AC-110 gunship flying over them, saying, "Hey, look, you're 400 meters away from the target house that you're going to kill or capture the bad guy." And then they go, "Uh-oh, we see heat signatures of 4 guys running out of that house, and they just ran 100 yards away, and they're hiding in the bushes. They're just laying there." And Jason's like, "Okay, thanks, got it." Like, "All right, now you're about 100 yards away from him. Now you're 50 yards away from him. Now you're," and then boom, machine guns light up. They were hiding. They weren't hiding. They were laying behind machine guns. The machine guns were cold. They didn't give off a heat signature. So the AC-110 did not see a heat signature. They just saw 4 bodies laying there hiding. And so Jason and his team walked into an ambush. Jason got shot 8 times across the body, once in the arm, and as he swung around, it shot him. PKM machine gun round went right through his face, blew out his orbital plate and his nose. And now he's laying there looking to die. So as I'm talking to him, I read his book years before in 2013 when he wrote it, and then I met him when we were speaking at an event together, and he's like, "Dude, you got to help me with my business." And I was like, "I'd be more than happy to," and now he's crushing it. So and then we became friends. And
he's an awesome guy, by the way. I don't know.
Do you know him?
Yeah, was able to interview him for the show, and I don't know if it'll be released before or after this, but such a cool conversation, really good.
Right? Yeah. And by the way, every Wednesday we send each other dirty jokes through voice chat. So anyway, your audience needs to hear this story, and so they'll hear it from him. But the craziest part is I was like, "Jay, so what exactly ran through your mind, because me, I'd probably first poop myself. Second, I would be freaking out and thinking about my kids and my wife and da-da-da. He's like, I was just pissed off, man. I was just pissed off. Like, how did I get shot? Now my guys have to do the fighting for me. Now I'm a liability. I'm like, this guy's resilient.
Yeah.
Like, I would be laying there just, okay, how do I just die quietly? And he's like, I just kept telling myself, stay awake to stay alive, stay awake to stay alive. Because he had read somewhere that if you can stay awake and make it to the medical tent, there's like a 90% chance, if you can show up with a heartbeat, right, that they'll save you. And so, like, this guy is going through this whole resiliency exercise while he's been shot up in a foreign country. And most of us will stub our toe and we're like, ow, it's over. We collapse. So I've decided long ago that I'm going to be resilient. I'm going to be like a cockroach and a weed. And the running joke, many of my coaching clients call me a cockweed, right? It's a fun. So you look at a weed, an everyday garden weed. It grows in sand and dirt and asphalt and concrete, off a telephone pole. I've seen it growing out of snow. You look at a cockroach, man, those things can survive like a nuclear holocaust. They're resilient, period. So why can't I be? And if you just, it's a mindset shift. And if you take that mind shift and you're like, I may have temporary defeat. I will not have permanent failure. That's resiliency.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm going to be resourceful. I'm going to find a way when there's no way available. And I'm going to be resilient. I will not fail, but I will have temporary defeat. But I will not fail, accept failure. And finally, I must be relentless, the third R. I must be relentless in my approach and in my drive to achieve the outcome that I want. And in my case, it's to have 2,500 Fit Body Bootcamp locations. And by God, economy crash, fucking coronavirus, whatever it is, I'm going to have 2,500 Fit Body Bootcamp locations. Period. Who's going to stop me?
Yeah. I love that. I mean, I think it's such a powerful, again, going back to reframing. Like, I think nowadays everyone wants like instant gratification. It's like, oh, I sent 30 Facebook messages out. I didn't convert any client opportunities. Like I didn't get any calls booked or anything like that. And for me, and transparently, like I wish I did this more frequently, but I look back and I don't think I've ever shared this on the show, but my grandfather spent 4.5 years in Auschwitz. So when I look at that, why can't I endure a little more adversity over here? Like my problems aren't so bad. It's just that ability to reframe. I love that piece.
Like most of us today, because we've had it so good for so long, like post-economy crash, right? The economy crashed in 2008. Then the upswing began like in 2013, 14, 15, and it's just been go, 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 go. And what ends up happening is there's a little term that says good times create weak men create bad times create bad times create strong men create good times, and then the cycle continues. That cycle just continues. And then, of course, when there's good times, people get weak again. What ends up happening is, imagine if you're a dryer, like an actual clothing dryer, next to your washing machine. Everyone's got their shit set on delicate. We're too delicate these days. Like crank that knob up to savage. Like your grandfather, who was in that camp, he's got that shit set on savage.
Yeah.
Some shit would have to really happen to rival Auschwitz. Right?
100%.
But the rest of us, we're so delicate. It's like someone sneezes and we catch a cold. It's like that. You don't have to.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why I resonate so well with a lot of the stuff that you put out on social, your book, because it's very much unfiltered. And I think nowadays, especially the last like year or two, it's almost become cool to be unfiltered. But you could tell who's faking it.
Yeah.
You know,
there's even fake unfiltered. There's fake authenticity now.
Exactly. Authenticity, I think, is just a key word nowadays. So is vulnerability on the other side of that spectrum. But these skill sets, these 3 R's, can anybody develop that?
Mm-hmm. It's a muscle. It's a muscle. You got to train it. You got to voluntarily, like the human body does not, the human body, the human mind, the human psyche, the human heart, the human soul, the human spirit does not want to deal with suffering and adversity. Look at David Goggins. He chooses suffering and adversity as the norm. Mm-hmm. There's Jesse Itzler taught me a term. He goes, you know what you do every Sunday? I go, what? He goes, it's called mosagi. It's a Japanese term. Have you heard this term?
No, I'm not
And
familiar.
what it is, you could do it as like, fasting for long periods of time. But the Japanese have a term that you do something that brings to you so much suffering, so much adversity, that the benefits of self-awareness, self-enlightenment, self-growth from that last an entire year. They plan out suffering. It could be fasting. It could be trekking up a mountain within so many weeks, right? But they do something so intense during once a year that the benefit effects of that last a whole year, right? Like your grandfather went through that not voluntarily, obviously, right? And I went through that coming to the United States. Like, it was not fun having to figure out what we're eating, why we're getting kicked out, evicted, etc. So imagine if you then, by choice, put yourself into those situations. So every Sunday, I do 2 hours of jiu-jitsu where I'm the white belt, and it's all like blue belts, purple belts, and multiple degree black belts whooping on me. In my own private gym, by the way, right? In my own private gym. Good friends of mine, but as soon as they get on the mat, they're just savages. Like they get me for 2 hours. And then after that, I go train legs for an hour and a half. And then later that night, around 7:30 or 8 o'clock, me and some of the instructors for the project, this thing that I run, get together and we hike this massive 3.5 mile loop that's got 4 giant hills. And all we do is we attack the hill. Like, as soon as there's a hill coming, we're walking on the straightaway, we see a hill, we look at each other and we just attack the hill. Every Sunday, I put myself through like so much suffering that Monday is zero anxiety. It's like, dude, you run 7 companies and you got Fit Body Boot Camp is your big flagship company. Aren't you stressed? I used to be, but Sundays are so overwhelming, physically, emotionally, mentally. I'm like, bring on Monday, man. I just like burn 10,000 calories on Sunday.
Dude, I love that. I feel like I'm on the right path then, thinking about stuff like that. I was a goalkeeper in soccer, so that was always my license to be crazy, right? Like, you got to have a couple screws loose if you're a goalkeeper in any sport. And soccer is probably one of the more tame ones for that. But I think that one of the things I'm most proud of is being able to pivot that mindset and just that same intensity and attack my career in corporate when I was still there in my business career. But I think a lot of it was, like, I remember doing legs at like 8 a.m. on a Saturday in my early 20s when everyone else was like probably still stumbling home from the clubs.
Bam.
And I'm like, you got to be a special type of human to think that way. And I just felt like that would serve me. The way that you just shared that resonated really well.
That's what you were doing. Yeah, that's what you're doing. You've got the right screws loose. Like, never let anyone tell you that, hey, you got screws loose. I do, but they're the right ones. We all do. It's just, what flavor of crazy are you? I'm the kind of flavor of crazy. You're the kind of flavor of crazy that's going to lead to success. I could also go nuts on cocaine and heroin. Like, you put anything in front of me, I will be the best at it. So thank God I choose entrepreneurship and helping people, because I could also be the best serial killer. I could probably be the best like coke user on the planet. I've just chosen to do good with my superpowers of screws being loose.
Yeah.
And when people are like, why do you do all that on Saturday, on a Sunday at the age of 45? And what about your family? Don't you feel you're neglecting? Shut the front door. How about this? You're like on your iPhone all day long, 7 days a week, neglecting your family, standing right next to them. So that I can take one Sunday off and just like punish my body mentally, physically, emotionally. But what they're doing is they're transferring their feeling. They're projecting their insecurities on you, right? So train legs even earlier next time.
Yeah, 100%. You briefly mentioned anxiety, and I know in your book you share a lot about your journey with it. That was super powerful for me because a lot of my journey, the fact that I'm even in the high performance world, I can stem back to my journey with anxiety and panic. I'd love for you to just share that story with the audience and talk about how you moved out of it. I'm really curious about how you manage it nowadays on top of the Sunday and stuff like that.
Yeah, so the Sundays are a big deal, right? Like, anxiety is 2 things. It's anticipation of future pain. Like, if you're having anxiety, it's because you have some unresolved thing that you're just like, I don't know when that ticking time bomb is going to go off. That would make me anxious too. If there's a ticking time bomb there and I'm like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Yeah. It's anticipation of future pain, right? Number 1. Number 2 is you've got too much energy and you're not using it. So people that like first thing Monday morning or every morning, they'll eat a fast digesting carb and chase it with like a coffee with 2 extra shots of espresso in it. That's a lot of carbs and sugar and caffeine. That's a lot of energy. Go out there and do jujitsu and then train legs and then go attack the hills. But you're likely not. You're going to sit in your car in traffic, go to work. That's when the anxiety sets in. So 1, fix your diet. Number 2, attack the anticipated pain, right? Because if anxiety is anticipation of future pain, attack the pain, address the issues before most of us want to just ignore it, procrastinate, pretend it's not there, bury our head, and then when it blows up, I'll deal with it. You're dealing with so much anxiety, man. So like when I started having that at the age of 37, growing Fit Body Bootcamp, growing any big business, it is a test Ed Milet calls it. He says, entrepreneurship is the greatest form of personal development. And I believe he's 100% right. Like, you learn a lot about yourself.
Yeah.
Your emotional discipline, your emotional tolerance, your ability to take risks. How much money am I willing to lose and still keep swimming? And so for me at 37, I started to deal with a lot of business growth problems and business partner problems that were giving me anxiety because I wasn't addressing the issue. And in fact, and I talk about it openly in my book, at night I would go home and eat high energy foods. I would literally drink Diet Coke and have like 3 or 4 bagels with it, lots of carbs, right? So caffeine and carbs. Before going to bed, I would eat my emotions, but then I'd have all this anxiety until it actually manifested into a massive panic attack, which I thought was a heart attack. After about having 3 or 4 of those over a 2-week period, I went to the doctor and they said, look, man, you're obviously stressed. Duh, right? We're gonna put you on Xanax. I tried that for a week, just made me numb and lost all creativity. It's like, I don't want this. The doctor said, well, then you gotta go find a therapist and work with a therapist. I did. And that's what my therapist taught me is like, when you're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, that's probably gonna trigger your anxiety. Just like an alcoholic, when he's hungry, angry, lonely, tired, halt, he's gonna go back to the bottle, or more likely, or the porn addict, or the food addict, or whatever the drug is. And then anxiety is anticipation of future pain. And then your diet determines a lot of the energy. Like, do you want food that's gonna spike your energy while you're sitting there like, or do you want food right now that if you're gonna be sitting in your car, maybe I should eat higher fat, higher protein, and 0 sugars and carbs. Maybe save that for later before my workout where I can actually use that energy.
Yeah.
And so people just, part of it is an education. And so I went to a therapist for 16 months. And by the way, I learned that in the first 4 weeks, how to deal with my anxiety. The next 16 months or 15 months were spent on dealing with what happened to me as a child, having been molested. Because I had so much rage, shame, and confusion. I was so angry that that happened to me. That's the rage. The shame, it's so embarrassing. No one can find out. No one knew. I'm 37 years old and no one knew. No one. Not even my wife. And then the confusion. Am I gay? Did I do something to attract those 2 older boys to take advantage of me? I don't think I'm gay, but am I? I don't know, right? So there's this confusion. And so imagine going through your whole life like that, and so therefore proving a point, getting into fights, getting into trouble, doing all the wrong things with all the wrong people. So thank God anxiety led me to a therapist who fixed my anxiety or gave me the tools to fix my anxiety in 4 weeks. The next 15 months were spent on me becoming a whole person again and realizing what happened to me as a little boy was not my fault. And that I am lovable, I'm not broken, and it's something that happens to 1 out of every 3 people.
It's a crazy statistic, by the way.
Yeah.
Was there any stigma for you about going to see a therapist?
There was, but when you're thinking you're having a heart attack, dude, at the age of, how old are you right now?
29.
29.
I was 23 when I had my first panic attack, though.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So imagine at 20, and did you know it was a panic attack?
No.
Right?
No, I had no idea.
I don't know what a heart attack feels, and I hope I never find out. But dude, I just remember thinking like, holy crap, I'm 37 and I'm dying now? Like, this is how I die? And I just remember thinking, who's gonna walk Chloe down the aisle? Who's gonna teach Andrew to become a modern day knight, my kids? And the pain of that panic attack and the ones that followed afterwards over the next 2 weeks were so bad because I thought I could muscle through it, because every guy was like, I'll just muscle through it.
Yeah.
I couldn't. And the pain of that, thank God. And again, another thing, right? Like sometimes when I'm like, I'm so thankful that I got molested. It's like, what? What's the matter with you? I'm like, it built so much adversity in my ability to overcome things. And because of that, I've got so much compassion and empathy towards people who have gone through trauma, right? It's become a superpower for me. And so while I certainly don't want people to go and get molested, that's not the goal here. Like, it's become a superpower for me because I worked with Kevin, my therapist, for 16 months, and he helped me turn that into a superpower, and that I'm not broken, I am lovable. So had I not had that panic attack, man, I would have never voluntarily addressed this, gone to a therapist, because yeah, for a man, the stigma, but as it turns out now, ironically, I've sent 22 people that I know to Kevin, my therapist, over the last 4 years. And it's funny, right? Because, well, B did it, so if B could go, I could go.
You give people permission.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so cool to see see that particular concept right there just show out or play out in so many different areas of life. I remember I was at an event, at Lewis Howe's event a couple years ago, and he did this example of shining your light, right? So you put everyone's flashlight on in this auditorium. He shut all the lights off, and then he instructed everybody one by one to shine this light. All of a sudden you realize that everyone's phones lit the auditorium more than their actual lights did.
Oh, wow.
And it's just a beautiful illustration of exactly what you're talking about, because for anyone watching the video, like, you're a big dude.
Right, like I shouldn't be molested. Big dude, tattoos, beard, but I was an innocent little kid, right? But yeah, when you look at me, it's like, well, okay, if this guy can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think society, when you talk about therapy and stuff like that, society has a bit of a stigma around it, hence the question. I was really curious to see where you would go with it. And if it's like, damn, if Bedros can go through that and work through something like that, maybe I should at least open my eyes to it. I think that's so cool.
And the freedom you get from it, man. I kid you not, Mike, people would be like, B, is your hair different? Did you lose weight? Did you get a tan? Like, nothing had changed. I had lost I don't know how to describe it other than I lost some of the darkness that I would carry. I carried darkness. And anyone who has experienced either physical or sexual trauma, watching or listening to this, are like, holy fuck, that's what it is. It's darkness. I carry darkness. That's exactly what you carry, and you don't have to carry that weight. If I gave you a burlap bag full of bricks, I'm like, carry this the rest of your life, Mike, anything you try and do, you're going to be slower, and then there's going to be more friction. What if I'm like, Mike, now you can put the burlap bag down. You're going to be lighter faster.
So easy, yeah.
Put the bag down. Put the darkness down. And that only happens, by the way, what got you here won't get you there. So you can't self-talk your way out of the darkness. Like, you have to work with a pro. That's it.
Yeah. I've heard you talk a lot about really like leveraging rage to create your success.
In fact, I told Kevin, my therapist, I'm like, do not get rid of this rage.
So that's my question.
Yeah.
Is, when my initial thought when I first heard you talk about darkness was kind of like that dark rage. So how do those, are there different like elements of the darkness for you?
Yeah, so now it's rage by way of, have you read the book Relentless by Tim Grover?
Yeah.
It's that kind of rage. Like I got a point to prove to people who are like, hey, this foreigner can't make it. It's that. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to prove a point in a good, healthy way, right? Point to prove to go kill these people would be a very bad thing.
Yeah.
To go make a lot of money and do a lot of good with it and have them choke on my success, well, that's a good thing. And so, yeah, I do have the rage in my eyes, the chip on my shoulder, and the fire in my belly that I always say. And I said, Kevin, do not get rid of those three things. I do not need help getting those three things. I will fire you the moment I see you're trying to get rid of those three things with me. And we got a good laugh about it, because that is a superpower as well. But the darkness, the kind of rage that brought on was like, I didn't want to tell you what I've put my wife through in fights. Are you married?
No.
If you get married, you're going to get in a fight. The things that you say that you cannot take back, the actions that you take that you cannot take back, leave a massive scar on that relationship. And I share this openly and honestly. Same with in my 20s. Again, I was big, took a lot of steroids, got bigger, and because I had all this dark rage in me, I was just waiting for the right shoulder to bump into someone and for someone to say something. And many a times, I've been the one that ended up in the hospital because I didn't know there was more than one guy in that car when I slammed my brakes in front of them because they cut me off. And a car full of dudes came out and beat the pulp out of me. Karmic justice, by the way. Very real. And so I share that with you because that was rage under darkness. Rage under relentlessness, like just like, you know what? I'm going to show you what I can do.
Yeah.
Like, that's a pretty cool thing, man. Yeah, it's a superpower.
How have you learned how to like decipher the difference and toggle that?
I think age and wisdom helps. I'm 45. At 35, I was still an asshole. At 37 is when I had the first panic attack, right? I would feel anxiety. I would feel anxious. Age, and then, of course, going to Kevin, and like, Kevin, I feel this way under this. Like, I literally described to my therapist about, 'cause sometimes I'll carry a pocket knife with me. And I described a scenario where I was talking to someone, and then they they flipped my switch. They didn't even realize it. And within minutes, and they were sitting down and I was standing, I'd pulled out my pocket knife and I had stabbed them 7 times in the chest before they could even get up. And I described that to him. He's like, let me explain where that's coming from. Again, I don't know where it's coming from. I got a lot of darkness. Shit happened to me as a kid. But once you trust your therapist, and it's not like I did it, I thought of it in my head.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, where did that come from, Kevin? Because I could even hear the sound of like that, of the knife going into this person's. I know, right?
Yeah.
And I can. Ed, you never heard that one, huh? And he's like, he's just laughing. I'm like, you've heard this before? He's like, yeah, you're normal. This is exactly what happens when a little boy and your rite of passage into manhood gets taken advantage of, and now you're in the protection mode, and now you must flex all your muscles in every way. This is why you make so much money, by the way, right? Because money creates insulation. I can protect myself from people. Money is another form of muscle protection, right? You can isolate and insulate yourself from the people and the pain and the whatever. You can get surround yourself with yes men and women. And I was like, holy crap, here I thought I was just like, I'm an entrepreneur. Like, okay, so I was actually able to enjoy making money instead of just keep amassing money. Since working with Kevin, I've literally shut down 2 or 3 business partnerships and ventures that I've been in because like now I know why I was making it. So like when someone tells you why you're doing it, it's like, oh, got it. So imagine like being across from someone who is not related to you, you don't work with him, you're not best friends, you just see him every Monday at 5:30 right after work. And I don't know why I chose Mondays, but I did. Some days I'm like, can I just lay here on the couch and pay you the $270 afterwards? Because I'm just so tired after a heavy day. But yeah, man, working with a therapist will solve so much of your problems. You will get answers to questions that are floating around in here. And he was like, this is why you're angry. This is why you're full of rage. You have unanswered questions about rage and confusion and shame. So we're going to spend the next few months answering that. And as we did, it's like the way he described it. Imagine if I gave you basketball and I'm like, put you in a pool. I'm like, all right, Mike, hold it underwater. You can hold it down for a long while, but at some point you're going to get an itch on your nose or your ear. When you move your hand, that ball's going to pop up.
Yeah.
That's rage. If I could just take all the air out of that basketball, it'll just lay there underwater on its own.
Yeah.
That's what we did.
Dude, I think that's the best way I've ever heard to illustrate that. Because, I mean, anyone that's ever been in a pool, like you've tried to hold that ball down there, and the second it's the little bit of a shift, the balance goes off and it'll just fly out.
And how many times have we freaked out on someone like that out of nowhere, went 0 to 100, and like, what happened to you? It's all that childhood trauma. That's all that you don't know how to deal with and cope with. That's all.
I love this piece of the conversation because I think that it gives such a good light to something that can be so powerful. But again, it's like what society wants to paint a picture about something, and it restricts a lot of people from opening up to it. So I love that you share that so openly. I want to quickly shift gears to communication a little bit before we wrap up, because I want to be respectful of your time. I remember in your book, and by the way, guys, if you haven't grabbed a copy of Bedros' book, go do it. A phenomenal read. I remember you said that you were literally pissing your pants because you didn't know how to tell the teacher that you had to go to the restroom. Yeah. And earlier in our conversation, you also painted this picture of like unlearning or like removing your accent so you could assimilate and all these sorts of things. Like, how have you gone from that to becoming a master communicator that can build rapport so easily and build one of, if not the fastest growing fitness franchises in the world, such a successful company? Like, paint that picture for us.
When the pain is great enough, like you will do anything to get to the other side of that pain. And so imagine, it was probably first grade. So I came to the United States at 6. It was June. So in September, I started kindergarten. It takes a couple years for you to get proficient in language. And so actually might have been kindergarten. So, you sit on those little squares that the teachers have taped up and they read the story. And in Armenian, I remember asking, she's not Armenian, but in Armenian, I'm like, I gotta pee, where's the restroom? And she can't understand me, God bless the teacher's soul. And so I think I have an idea where the restroom is. So I get up to go, she yells in English, but I could understand, like, sit down. So I sit down, I can't hold the pee anymore, and I peed myself. And of course, everyone knows. Yeah. And so, of course, now everyone's laughing. I'm like, crap, I can't wait till we get evicted out of this next Section 8 housing so I can go to a new school. I hated moving schools. The only time I didn't mind is that time, because I just wanted to leave. I wanted to disappear. But the pain of that, the pain of like being told, go back to your own effing country, you foreigner. Like, I've been told that. My brother, my sister, my mom and dad, I've heard them getting yelled at. And the accent is the surest giveaway. That's the surest giveaway. So I was like, I'm never going to be laughed at. I'm never going to be told to go back to my own country because I'm going to learn the language so well, better than the people that were born here. And one of the greatest compliments I got was 3 years ago, I don't know, Ed would know, 2 or 3 years ago when Ed Milet came here to interview me for his show. And he goes, I just want to let you know you are a master communicator. Like, you communicate with some of the best out there. Ed Milet, like, the guy talks on stage with Tony Robbins. No joke, 2 months after he said that, I had the opportunity to get on stage just to share the stage with Tony Robbins. I went up right after him. And I'm like, if that's not serendipitous, like, the pain of pissing yourself and being laughed at for your accent is so great that you decide that you're going to be the best communicator. So the next time I got to ask, I got to go pee, man, I will ask you in the most eloquent way with no accent, and you will say, yes, sir, you may go pee.
That's so powerful. I was literally listening to that interview on the drive up from downtown LA earlier, so that kind of influenced the question. And I thought about it, I'm like, dang, he's right. You know, I've had the opportunity to hear you speak at a mastermind and watched a lot of your content over the years. So I had to ask that because I'm like, especially after you talked about the accent piece as well, I'm like, dang, that's true.
Yeah, pain is a great motivator, man, right?
For sure.
Pain is a great motivator.
I mean, it's one of the most powerful things that comes to decision making, right? So, Bedros, before I ask you the last question, where do you hang out most on social? Where can people follow, grab a copy of the book, get involved with what you're doing?
So they can get a copy of the book at manup.com. I'm laughing where I hang out because up until today, I say Instagram and just at Bedros Keuilian. But by God, I'm really digging TikTok, man. I'm just up on TikTok. I somehow magically in a couple weeks got like 30,000 followers. And I'm digging TikTok.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Instagram mostly. I don't reply to DMs or questions on TikTok. I just post and go away. On Instagram, I'm actually active and involved.
I love it. I wanted to ask you off camera about TikTok, so I'm glad that you mentioned that, because you're one of the few people that I'm following in the entrepreneur space. Before I haven't pivoted time and energy over there yet, but I'm very curious about the space. So
do it. It's your future clients are at TikTok, and just like we saw the pattern where people went, the young kids were on Facebook, and then they went to Instagram because the grown-ups came. Then the grown-ups came to Instagram, so the kids went to TikTok. And now the grown-ups are like, hey, the kids are on TikTok, let's go there and crash their party. So one, our current clients are going to TikTok. And two, that generation, dude, it's so crazy. I'll put up something very basic. Like if you're dealing with anxiety, just send 2 people a gratitude text message and you'll see that your anxiety goes away when they thank you and tell you that they really needed that message. And people are like, oh my God, I've never heard that. Thank you so much. You're like a second dad to me. Well, you're my future client. Yeah. Like in 5 years, I'll be selling you a franchise or coaching or something, and I am not afraid of selling. It's like, Bedros, how dare you? Yeah, I'm going to extract a lot of money from them and then give them even more money back.
Yeah.
That's how business happens.
Exactly.
I can't wait to take their money.
Exactly. We'll link all that up, guys. Make sure to follow him on TikTok, on Instagram. Bedros, the last question I have for you, going all the way back to the 4-year-old version of you in Armenia, going through the immigration process. We didn't really talk about this, but you mentioned, I know that your dad bribed a Soviet official to be able to escape to Italy. Coming over here, going through all the different stories that we've talked about up until right now, CEO of Fit Body Bootcamp, multiple other companies, growing rapidly. What's been the biggest lesson that you've learned that has yielded the most results and had the biggest impact in your life and in your business?
Yeah. The biggest lesson I've learned, and thankfully it's a lesson I've learned by watching others, and that's another thing, man, I've learned. My dad taught me this early on. My dad, God, the uncle that I'm named after, which is my dad's brother, he was a very bad human being. And my dad was like, he beats his wife, he's just a horrible human being. I'm not going to be like my older brother, is what my dad said. So he would constantly tell me that. He's like, some of the best lessons you learn by watching other people's mistakes. I hate the fact that I'm named after him, but whatever. I can't do anything about that other than change my name. I'm not about to do that. I'm halfway through my fucking life. So the lesson is that your reputation, and this is a Warren Buffett quote, and he says, it takes 20 years to build your reputation and 20 seconds to ruin it. And today on social media more than ever, because if someone's like, hey, Andy Frisella, I'm doing X, Y, and Z for Bedros. And Andy Frisella texts me and is like, hey, is this guy doing this for you? And I'm like, nope. Boom. If Andy just puts it out on his social media, on his podcast, anywhere, that reputation's gone for that person, right? And something like that's happened in that very exact scenario. Good for Andy for not putting it out there, that guy's business, but also good for Andy for smashing that guy verbally. And so it takes 20 years to build your reputation, man. I see so many people like flossing and flaunting and being fake. And listen, someone's going to be able to, like, I can just go on the MLS and see if you own that house or if you're renting it. And the MLS is the multiple listing service.
Yep.
Right? And so I can go on an MLS and, like, be careful what you talk about on social media, because if you say you own this mansion, you don't. I can tell you who owns the deed to that mansion. And reputation, man, once you lose that reputation, there ain't no coming back from that, not for a long time.
Bedros, thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate the opportunity.
100%.